The sound of concrete cracking echoed through the suburban morning as Karen's jackhammer tore into what wasn't hers to destroy. But when Marcus discovered what she'd done to his late father's memorial sidewalk, the war that followed would turn their quiet neighborhood into a battlefield where concrete became both weapon and grave. By dawn, one of them would learn that some lines should never be crossed, and some revenge comes with a foundation that never cracks. The first thing Marcus noticed when he pulled into his driveway wasn't the dust cloud billowing across Maple Street, or even the industrial roar of machinery at 7 in the morning. It was the smile on Karen Whitman's face as she guided a rented jackhammer across what used to be his sidewalk, his father's sidewalk. Marcus killed the engine and sat frozen behind the wheel of his pickup truck, watching chunks of concrete explode into the air like shrapnel. 23 years of weather had darkened the cement, but he could still make out the faint impression near the mailbox where his 8-year-old hand had pressed into the wet concrete in 1987. His father had laughed and said it would last forever. "What the hell are you doing?" Marcus's voice carried over the machine's diesel roar as he slammed his truck door. Karen looked up, her perfectly styled blonde hair somehow unaffected by the concrete dust coating everything else. She wore a pink tracksuit that probably cost more than Marcus made in a week at the construction site, and safety goggles that made her look like some deranged suburban scientist. She killed the jackhammer's engine. The sudden silence felt violent. "Oh, Marcus." Perfect timing. Her voice carried that particular brand of manufactured sweetness that preceded every neighborhood catastrophe she'd orchestrated over the past 5 years. "I'm fixing the drainage. Problem? This old concrete was causing water to pool in my flower beds." Marcus stepped closer, his work boots crunching on broken concrete. The chunks weren't just random debris, they were pieces of his childhood, fragments of the last project he'd ever completed with his father before the heart attack took him that winter. "This isn't your property." His voice came out steadier than he felt. "The sidewalk is on my side of the property line." Karen's smile never wavered, but something predatory flickered behind her eyes. "Actually, I had it surveyed last month. Turns out the property line runs right through here." She gestured vaguely with a manicured hand. "Randy down at the county office was so helpful. Randy Hutchins." Of course, Karen's cousin, who worked in the zoning department and had somehow missed the fact that her hot tub extended 3 feet into the nature preserve behind her house. "Show me the survey." Marcus kept his voice level, but his hands were already clenching into fists. "Oh, I don't carry those things around with me. It's all on file at the county office." She bent down and fired up the jackhammer again, the conversation clearly over in her mind. But Marcus wasn't moving. He stood there watching her destroy 36 years of history, chunk by chunk. This was the sidewalk where he'd learned to ride a bike, where his father had taught him the difference between cement and concrete while they waited for it to cure. This was where his father had pressed a silver dollar into the wet surface, creating a little time capsule that Marcus had shown his own son just 2 months ago. The son who was supposed to visit next weekend. The son who always asked about Grandpa's sidewalk and the story of the silver dollar. "Karen." Marcus's voice cut through the machine noise like a blade. "Stop." She either couldn't hear him or chose not to. The jackhammer bit deeper, and Marcus watched his father's silver dollar disappear in a spray of concrete dust. Something inside him snapped. He reached down and grabbed the jackhammer's power cord, yanking it from the portable generator with enough force to send Karen stumbling backward. "Are you insane?" she shrieked, pulling off her safety goggles. "You could have hurt me. You're destroying my property." "It's not your property." Her voice rose to a pitch that made dogs start barking 3 houses down. "I have the legal right to show me the survey." "I don't have to show you anything. You're just mad because someone finally stood up to you and your white trash family." The words hung in the air like smoke from a house fire. Marcus felt the blood drain from his face, then rushed back with interest. Karen had crossed lines before, complained about his truck being parked on the street, called the city about his fence height, even reported his teenage nephew for skateboarding on the sidewalk, but she'd never gone personal, never brought his family into it. Never disrespected his father's memory. "What did you just say?" Karen's chin lifted defiantly. "You heard me. Your father was a drunk who couldn't hold a job, and you're just like him. This whole neighborhood has gone downhill since people like you moved in." Marcus took a step forward, then another. Karen's defiance flickered for just a moment, but she held her ground. 23 years I've lived here," Marcus said quietly. 23 years I've watched you terrorize every family on this street. Mrs. Patterson moved because of you. The Johnsons sold their house after you called the police on their kids 17 times. You've made this place a war zone. I maintain property values, you destroy lives. They stood 3 feet apart now, close enough that Marcus could smell her expensive perfume mixing with concrete dust. Close enough to see the tiny lines around her eyes that all the Botox couldn't quite hide. "Get off my property," she said, but her voice had lost some of its edge. "This is my property, and you're going to fix what you destroyed." Karen laughed, a sound like breaking glass. "I'm not fixing anything. In fact, I think I'll finish the job." She moved toward the jackhammer, but Marcus stepped in front of it. "Touch that machine again, and we'll have problems. We already have problems." She pulled out her phone. I'm calling the police. You're threatening me. Go ahead. Marcus crossed his arms. Call them. Let's see what they say about your survey. That doesn't exist and the property damage you've caused. Karen's finger hovered over the phone. For a moment, Marcus thought she might back down. Then he saw her jaw set in that familiar way that meant she was about to double down on whatever insane position she'd taken. You know what? Fine. I'll call the police. And while I'm at it, I'll call the city inspector about that shed you built without permits, and the county about your septic system that's probably contaminating the groundwater. And maybe I'll give your boss a call and tell him about the tools you've been stealing from job sites. Each threat hit like a physical blow. The shed was legal, he'd gotten permits, the septic system was fine, and he'd never stolen anything in his life. But Karen had connections, and she had money, and in a small town like Millbrook, sometimes that was enough. You're lying. Prove it. Her smile was back, sharper than before. See, Marcus? This is what happens when you mess with people who know how the world really works. I own half this town, and the other half owes me favors. You're just some construction worker who thinks he can intimidate me? She started dialing. Marcus watched the numbers appear on her screen and realized this was the moment. This was where he could walk away, take the high road, let the lawyers and insurance companies sort it out. His father would have wanted him to be the bigger man, but his father's silver dollar was now concrete dust in Karen's flower beds. Hang up the phone, Karen, or what? The question hung between them like a loaded gun. Marcus looked at the destroyed sidewalk, at the woman who'd spent 5 years making his life hell, at the phone in her perfectly manicured hands. He thought about his son coming to visit, asking about Grandpa's sidewalk and getting silence instead of stories. Or you're going to find out what happens when someone finally fights back. Karen's laugh was triumphant. Oh, I'm so scared. What are you going to do? Tough guy? Hit me. Go ahead. Give me grounds for a real lawsuit. She held the phone to her ear, but her eyes never left Marcus's face, waiting for him to crack, waiting for him to do something stupid that would give her all the ammunition she needed to destroy him. Instead, Marcus smiled. It was a cold smile, the kind his father used to get when someone underestimated him on a job site, the kind that meant someone was about to learn a very expensive lesson. No, Karen, I'm not going to hit you. He stepped back, giving her space, letting her think she'd won. I'm going to do something much worse. What's that supposed to mean? Marcus was already walking toward his truck. You'll find out. As he drove away, Karen's voice followed him down the street, screaming threats and promises into her phone. But Marcus wasn't listening anymore. He was thinking about concrete, about foundations, about the fact that Karen's pristine white Mercedes was parked in her driveway, and she always left for her yoga class at exactly 9:30 every morning, and about how much cement mix he had left over from his last job. By the time Karen finished her phone call to the police, Marcus was already at Home Depot, loading bags of quick-set concrete into his truck bed. His hands shook slightly as he counted out enough for a foundation that would last forever, just like his father had taught him. Marcus spent the rest of Monday planning like his father had taught him to plan construction jobs, measuring twice, cutting once, and always having a backup plan. By Tuesday evening, he knew Karen's schedule better than she did. Yoga class, 9:30 to 11 a.m., Tuesdays and Thursdays. Grocery shopping, 2 p.m. Wednesdays at the upscale market across town. Book club, 7 p.m., every other Friday at her friend Linda's house. Weekend trips, every Saturday morning to her mother's place in Riverside, returning Sunday night. Was the small details that mattered. Karen always backed her Mercedes into the driveway, some obsessive-compulsive habit about quick exits. She parked it in exactly the same spot every time, centered between the decorative brick borders she'd installed last spring. And most importantly, she never moved the car between Tuesday yoga and Wednesday grocery runs. 20-6 hours. That's how long quick-set concrete needed to reach maximum strength. Marcus made his first move Wednesday night, long after Mercedes had disappeared down Maple Street toward the grocery store. He'd spent the afternoon at work, operating heavy machinery with the focused calm of a man who'd made peace with his choices. His foreman, Pete, had even commented on how relaxed he seemed. Whatever you're working through, Marcus, it's doing you good, Pete had said during their lunch break. You've been wound tight as a spring since your dad passed. If only he knew. At 8 p.m., Marcus backed his pickup truck into his own driveway and began unloading supplies. 40 bags of Quickrit, enough to pour a small foundation, a portable cement mixer he'd borrowed from the job site, garden hoses, tools, and a wheelbarrow that had seen more construction projects than most contractors. Mrs. Chen from across the street waved from her porch. Working late tonight, Marcus? Just some concrete work, he called back, which was technically true. Trying to beat the rain tomorrow. She nodded and went back inside. Marcus had always been the helpful neighbor, the guy who plowed driveways in winter and fixed broken fences without being asked. Nobody would question him working on a project after hours. The beauty of Karen's driveway was its isolation. Tall privacy hedges on both sides, planted by the previous owners and maintained with neurotic precision by Karen herself. She'd probably spent more on those hedges than Marcus made in 6 months, never realizing she was creating the perfect screen for her own destruction. Marcus wheeled the first batch of supplies through the gap in the hedge, his heart hammering against his ribs. This was it, the point of no return. He could still change his mind, pack everything up, go home and find a lawyer to fight Karen's property line claims through proper channels. Then he saw the destroyed sidewalk, still covered with chunks of his father's concrete, and kept walking. Karen's driveway was a masterpiece of suburban excess-stamped concrete with a brick border, designed to complement the house's fake Tudor styling. The Mercedes sat in its usual spot, pristine white against the decorative surface, like a luxury boat moored at an expensive dock. Marcus had always hated that car, not because it was expensive, but because of what it represented. Karen drove it exactly 12 miles per week to yoga, to the grocery store, to her mother's house. It sat in the garage most of the time, polished and pampered like a piece of jewelry. Meanwhile, Marcus drove his 15-year-old pickup truck to work sites, hauling tools and materials, actually using his vehicle for something productive. But tonight, Karen's symbol of suburban superiority was going to become her prison. Marcus started with the perimeter, mixing small batches of concrete and pouring them around the Mercedes tires. The work was meditative. Add water, mix, pour, smooth. His father had taught him the rhythm when he was 12 years old, and muscle memory took over even as his mind raced with possibilities. What if Karen came home early? What if a neighbor called the police about suspicious activity? What if the concrete didn't set properly and this whole plan fell apart? But the work continued, steady and methodical. By 10 p.m., he had a foundation 3 inches thick and 2 feet wide surrounding the Mercedes on all sides. The car looked like it was sitting on a small concrete island. Phase 1 complete, he whispered to himself, echoing something his father used to say at the end of each workday. The next morning, Marcus called in sick. He'd never used a personal day for revenge before, but there was a first time for everything. He positioned himself at his kitchen window with a cup of coffee and waited. Karen emerged from her house at exactly 9:25 a.m., dressed in her usual pink yoga outfit and carrying a water bottle that probably cost more than Marcus's work boots. She walked toward her car with the brisk confidence of someone who'd never encountered a problem money couldn't solve. Then she stopped. Marcus wished he had binoculars. From his kitchen window he could see her standing next to the Mercedes, but he couldn't make out her expression. He could imagine it, though, confusion giving way to anger, then escalating to that particular brand of entitled rage that only people like Karen could achieve. She walked around the car once, twice. Marcus could see her gesturing at the concrete, probably trying to figure out if this was some kind of elaborate prank or a genuine act of war. Then she pulled out her phone. Marcus counted the rings. 1, 2, 3, 911. What's your emergency? Even from across the street, Karen's voice carried, like a fire alarm. Someone has vandalized my property. They've poured concrete around my car. I want them arrested immediately. Marcus smiled and took another sip of coffee. Let the games begin. The police arrived in 12 minutes faster than they'd responded when the Hendersons' house got burglarized. Last month, 2 officers in a patrol car, followed by Karen's cousin Randy in his county zoning vehicle. Marcus recognized the setup immediately. Karen was calling in favors, trying to turn this into an official investigation with her family member as a friendly witness. Officer Martinez was new. Marcus didn't recognize him. But Officer Thompson had been on the force for 15 years, and Marcus had done concrete work on his patio 2 summers ago. Thompson was fair, thorough, and didn't like being manipulated by entitled residents with political connections. Marcus watched them examine the concrete, take photos, and listen to Karen's increasingly hysterical explanation. He could see her, pointing toward his house, making accusations, demanding immediate arrests. Randy was nodding along, but Thompson looked skeptical. After 20 minutes, the officers walked over and knocked on Marcus's door. "Morning, Marcus," Thompson said when he answered. "Nice to see you again. How's the concrete business?" "Can't complain. What brings you by?" "Well, your neighbor across the street seems to think you poured concrete around her car last night. Any truth to that?" Marcus looked genuinely puzzled. "Why would I do something like that?" "She says you two had an argument about property lines on Monday. Something about a destroyed sidewalk." "Oh, that?" Marcus nodded. "Yeah. She jackhammered up my father's old sidewalk, claimed it was on her property, but she couldn't show me any survey documentation. I was pretty upset about it. That sidewalk had sentimental value." Officer Martinez spoke up. "Were you upset enough to retaliate by pouring concrete around her car?" Marcus shook his head. "Officer, I work with concrete every day. If I was going to mess with someone's car, I'd do something a lot more creative than that. Plus, I was here all night. Ask Mrs. Chunchi saw me working on a project in my backyard until almost midnight," which was true. After finishing Karen's driveway, Marcus had spent 2 hours actually mixing concrete for a small patio repair, establishing his alibi and explaining any residual concrete dust on his clothes or truck. Thompson made notes. "Mind if we take a look at your truck?" just to rule you out as a suspect? Of course. Marcus led them to his pickup, which he'd washed thoroughly at 6 a.m. Clean truck bed, no concrete residue, tools properly stored. You know, Officer Thompson, I have to ask, has Mrs. Whitman shown you the survey she claims to have? The one that proves my sidewalk was on her property. Thompson and Martinez exchanged glances. She mentioned something about paperwork being on file at the county office? With Randy Hutchins, I'm guessing? Her cousin. Marcus kept his tone neutral. Just curious. Another exchange of glances. Marcus could see the wheels turning. Small-town cops knew all about family connections and who owed favors to whom. We'll look into that, Thompson said. In the meantime, do you have any idea who might have done this to Mrs. Whitman's car? Marcus scratched his head thoughtfully. Well, she's had disputes with pretty much every family on this street over the past few years. The Pattersons, the Johnsons, the Martinez family, no relation, I assume. He nodded toward Officer Martinez, who shook his head. She's made a lot of enemies. Could be anyone with a grudge and access to concrete. That's a pretty specific skill set, Martinez observed. Not really. You can buy quick-set concrete at any hardware store. Mix it with water, pour it, wait for it to harden. My 12-year-old nephew could do it. Thompson closed his notebook. Well, Marcus, thanks for your time. We'll be in touch if we need anything else. As they walked back toward Karen's house, Marcus heard Thompson say something to Martinez about checking county records and verifying property lines. Randy Hutchins was going to have some uncomfortable questions to answer. Marcus spent the rest of the day watching the show from his kitchen window. Karen made say. He stumbled to his kitchen window, still half asleep, and watched a crew of 4 men in hard hats systematically destroying Karen's driveway. The concrete barrier around her Mercedes was gone, reduced to rubble that filled the back of a dump truck. Karen stood in her bathrobe directing the operation like a general commanding troops, her voice sharp enough to cut glass even over the industrial noise. Sonafabich, Marcus muttered, reaching for his phone. The city inspector's office didn't open until 8 a.m., but he'd planned to call in the unpermitted work complaint first thing. Karen had beaten him to the punch, somehow getting a crew out before dawn, unless she'd gotten permits. Real ones. Marcus dressed quickly and walked to his mailbox, timing it to coincide with the crew's water break. One of the workers, a heavy-set man with concrete dust coating his beard, was smoking a cigarette by the truck. Morning, Marcus called over. Early start today. Ladies paying double time for emergency removal, the man replied. Seems someone played a hell of a prank on her. Yeah, I heard about that. Crazy stuff. You guys get permits for this kind of work? The worker snorted. Lady says she's got everything handled with the city. Above my pay grade, we just break concrete and haul it away. Marcus nodded and walked back to his house, but not before noticing Karen watching him from her kitchen window. Even at 30 yards, her smile looked predatory. By 9 a.m., the Mercedes was free and the driveway was a war zone of broken concrete and exposed dirt. The crew was gone. Karen was gone, probably to yoga, maintaining her routine even in crisis. Marcus was left staring at the destruction from his kitchen window, trying to figure out what the hell had just happened. His phone rang at 9:15. Marcus Reed, speaking. This is Janet Cooper from the city inspector's office. We received a complaint about unpermitted work at your address. I'll need to schedule an inspection for tomorrow morning. Marcus felt ice water flow through his veins. What kind of unpermitted work? Concrete removal and driveway modification. The complaint says you damaged city property while removing illegal structures from your neighbor's driveway. I think there's been a mistake. I didn't remove anything from anyone's driveway. According to our records, you filed for an emergency permit yesterday at 4:47 p.m. for concrete removal at 245 Maple Street. The work was completed this morning. 245 Maple Street. Marcus's address. I never filed for any permit. There was a pause. Sir, we have your signature on the application. We also have photo documentation of the completed work. The inspection tomorrow is just a formality to close out the permit. Marcus hung up and ran to his front door. His driveway looked exactly the same as it had for 15 years. Cracked asphalt with oil stains and weeds growing through the expansion joints. No concrete work, no modifications, nothing that would require a city permit. But somehow, according to official records, he'd filed for and received an emergency permit to remove concrete from his own property. Work that Karen's crew had actually performed on her driveway. Under his name, at his address. She'd set him up perfectly. Marcus called the inspector's office back and got voicemail. He called the city clerk's office and was told they'd have to research the permit application and get back to him. He called the police non-emergency line and was told it sounded like a civil matter that should be handled by a lawyer. By noon, he was standing in the cramped office of Tom Bradley, the only attorney in Millbrook who didn't play golf with Karen's husband at the country club. This is elaborate, Bradley admitted, reviewing the documents Marcus had managed to obtain from the city clerk. Someone forged your signature, filed a fraudulent permit application, and had work done under your name and permit number. The question is, can you prove it? The work wasn't done on my property. It was done on hers. but according to the permit application, the concrete removal was necessary to resolve a property line dispute. The work order specifies removing illegal concrete structures from the boundary area between 245 and 247 Maple Street. It's vague enough to cover work on either property. Marcus studied the paperwork. Karen's signature was nowhere to be found, but his was their reasonable forgery, though not perfect. How do I prove I didn't sign this? Handwriting analysis. But that takes weeks and costs thousands. Do you have an alibi for when this was filed? 4:47 p.m. yesterday, Marcus thought. Back, he'd been at work until 5:30. Then stopped at Home Depot for legitimate supplies. Then gone home to work on his actual patio project. Mrs. Chen had seen him, but that was around 8 p.m. I was at work, but I can't prove I didn't leave early to file paperwork. Bradley leaned back in his chair. Marcus, you're in trouble. If the city inspector finds unpermitted work on your property tomorrow, you'll be fined. If they find out someone used your name fraudulently, there's still the question of who hired the crew and paid for the work. Either way, you're looking at legal fees that could bankrupt you. What do you recommend? Pay the fine, keep your head down. Don't escalate this any further. Marcus left the lawyer's office feeling like he'd been punched. Karen had outmaneuvered him completely, turning his concrete revenge into evidence of his own criminal activity. She'd used his attack against him, judo style, and now he was facing consequences while she drove around town in her freed Mercedes, probably laughing at his stupidity. But as he walked back to his truck, something nagged at him. The permit application was too perfect, too detailed. Someone had put serious thought into this setup, which meant they'd had to know about his concrete work in advance. Unless they'd been watching him, Marcus drove home slowly, taking a different route that led past the county offices. Randy Hutchins' truck was in the parking lot, which confirmed his suspicions about who had helped Karen with the fraudulent paperwork. But it also gave him an idea. If Randy was involved, there might be a paper trail. Government employees were required to document everything, and Randy wasn't smart enough to cover his tracks completely. There had to be evidence of the original property line scam that started this whole war. Marcus parked across the street from the county building and called Pete, his foreman. Marcus, you feeling better? You sounded rough this morning. Actually, Pete, I need a favor. Remember that property survey we did for the Hendricks last year? The one where we had to verify boundary lines before pouring their foundation? Yeah, what about it? How did we access the county records? Who did we talk to? Sarah Mitchell in the records department. Nice lady, very helpful. Why? I need to research some property lines. Nothing urgent, just curious about my lot boundaries. Sarah's good people. Tell her I sent you. Marcus hung up and walked into the county building, bypassing Randy Hutchins' zoning office entirely. The records department was in the basement, a maze of filing cabinets and computer terminals that looked like it hadn't been updated since the Clinton administration. Sarah Mitchell was exactly what Pete had promised: helpful, knowledgeable, and completely unaware of the property line war raging on Maple Street. She pulled up the official records for both Marcus's and Karen's properties without question. Here we go, Sarah said, pointing at her computer screen. Your lot was surveyed in 1987 when your father purchased it. Mrs. Whitman's property was last surveyed in 2019, when she added the pool and hot tub. According to these records, the property line runs right along the edge of your sidewalk, the one that was there originally. Marcus leaned closer to the screen. What about recent surveys? Has anyone requested updated boundary information? Sarah typed for a moment. No recent surveys on file for either property. The last request for information was, let me see, yesterday, when Randy Hutchins pulled the records for a permit application. What kind of permit application? Emergency. Concrete removal. Filed under your name? Bingo. Randy had accessed the real property records to create the fraudulent permit, which meant there was a digital trail of his involvement. More importantly, the real survey data proved that Karen's original claim about the sidewalk being on her property was completely false. Sarah, could I get copies of the original survey documents? Both properties, of course. There's a small fee for copying. 20 minutes later, Marcus walked out of the county building with official proof that Karen had lied about the property line. Randy had helped her file fraudulent documents, and his father's sidewalk had been destroyed illegally. He also had a digital timestamp showing when Randy accessed the records, which would be crucial evidence if this went to court. But as he reached his truck, Marcus noticed Karen's white Mercedes pulling into the parking lot. She was coming to see Randy, probably to coordinate the next phase of whatever plan they were executing. Marcus sat in his truck and watched Karen walk into the building, his mind racing. He had evidence of fraud, but proving it would take months and cost thousands in legal fees. Meanwhile, Karen was escalating the conflict, using official channels and family connections to destroy him systematically. She was playing a long game, and she was winning. Unless Marcus changed the rules entirely, he pulled out his phone and called his nephew Tyler, a 20-year-old college student who worked part-time at the local hardware store and had a reputation for creative problems. Tyler had worked through the night, editing together security camera footage from 6 different neighbors, county records showing the pattern of complaints and property purchases. and audio recordings from city council meetings where Karen had appeared as a concerned citizen. The final product was 23 minutes of damning evidence titled, "The Maple Street Conspiracy: How One Woman Bought a Neighborhood Through Terror." Within 2 hours, it had been shared 47 times on Facebook and viewed over 1,000 times on YouTube. By noon, the local news station was calling Tyler's burner phone asking for interviews. Marcus watched the chaos unfold from his kitchen window, sipping coffee and feeling like he was observing a controlled demolition. Karen's house showed no signs of life, no lights, no movement, no frantic phone calls visible through her windows. Either she was lying low or she'd fled town entirely. At 2:17 p.m., Marcus got his answer. The black Escalade pulled into driveway with the smooth confidence of money-solving problems. 3 people emerged. A woman in an expensive suit who was clearly Karen's lawyer, a man with silver hair who looked like he'd stepped out of a country club board meeting, and Karen herself, wearing sunglasses despite the overcast sky. "The cavalry has arrived," Marcus muttered, recognizing the silver-haired man from newspaper photos. Richard Whitman, Karen's husband, the local real estate mogul who'd been conspicuously absent from his wife's neighborhood wars until now. Marcus's phone buzzed with a text from Tyler. "Holy shit, Uncle M, check the comments on the video. People are pissed." The YouTube comments section was a battlefield of neighborhood grievances spanning 5 years. Mrs. Patterson had written a novel-length response, detailing every harassment complaint Karen had filed against her family. The Johnsons had posted photos of the 7 different code enforcement visits they'd endured. Even people from other neighborhoods were sharing stories about Karen's complaints, derailing their home businesses or family gatherings. But it was the comment from Sarah Mitchell at the county records office that made Marcus's blood run cold. "This video contains proprietary government information that was accessed without authorization. We're cooperating with law enforcement to identify the source." Marcus called Tyler immediately. "Did you hack county records to get this information?" "Define hack," Tyler said, but his voice had lost its earlier confidence. "I may have used some creative methods to access public information that should have been freely available anyway." "Tyler, they're talking about law enforcement. I know, I saw the comment. But Uncle Marcus, look at what we accomplished." Karen's finished. "There's no way she can survive this kind of exposure." Marcus wasn't so sure. People like Karen didn't survive by giving up, they survived by burning everything down around them rather than admit defeat. His doorbell rang at 4 p.m. "Officer?" Thompson stood on Marcus's porch, with a warrant and a grim expression. Behind him, Officer Martinez was photographing the concrete mixing equipment still visible in Marcus's backyard. "Marcus, we need to talk." They sat at Marcus's kitchen table while Thompson reviewed a thick folder of evidence. Photos of the concrete barrier around Karen's Mercedes, the fraudulent permit application with Marcus's forged signature, digital forensics showing that someone had accessed county records from multiple IP addresses connected to Tyler's apartment building. "Karen Whitman is pressing charges," Thompson said. "Vandalism, harassment, cyberstalking, unauthorized access to government records, and conspiracy to defraud the city. Her lawyer is also filing a civil lawsuit for property damage, emotional distress, and defamation." Marcus felt the walls closing in. What about the fraud she committed? The fake property surveys, the pattern of harassment documented in that video? The video was produced using illegally obtained information, so it's not admissible as evidence. The property line dispute is a civil matter between neighbors. As for the harassment claims, Thompson shrugged, Mrs. Whitman says she was protecting property values and exercising her rights as a citizen to file legitimate complaints. This is bullshit, and you know it. What I know doesn't matter. What I can prove in court matters. Thompson closed the folder. "Marcus, you've got 2 choices. Take the plea deal. Her lawyer is offering community service, restitution for the concrete work, and a public apology, or fight this in court and risk serious jail time." "What kind of restitution?" $15,000. Cost of the emergency concrete removal, driveway repairs, and what she's calling security upgrades to protect against future harassment. Marcus laughed bitterly. "She makes me pay for the crew that freed her car from the concrete I poured around it. That's almost poetic. There's more. Part of the deal requires you to take down the video and issue a public statement admitting the allegations were false, so she gets to destroy the evidence of her own crimes." Thompson nodded grimly. "Like I said, Marcus, people with money play by different rules." After the officers left, Marcus sat in his kitchen, staring at the legal documents they'd served him. Arraignment was scheduled for Monday morning. Tyler was facing his own charges for computer crimes and conspiracy. The video that had seemed like their salvation was now being used as evidence of their criminal conspiracy. Karen had won again. Marcus was contemplating the plea deal when his phone rang at 7 p.m. "Mr. Reed, this is Janet Morrison from Channel 9 News. I'd like to interview you about the Maple Street situation. I can't comment on pending legal matters, I understand, but I'm not calling about the criminal charges. I'm calling about the story we're running tomorrow night about predatory property speculation in residential neighborhoods. Marcus felt something shift in his chest. What kind of story? We've been investigating Karen Whitman's property acquisitions for 3 months, completely independent of your video. Turns out she and her husband have been using harassment complaints and strategic code enforcement to drive down property values, then purchasing homes through shell companies. It's happened in 4 different neighborhoods across the county. Marcus gripped the phone tighter. Can you prove it? We have mortgage records, county filings, testimony from 2 former employees of Whitman Properties who say they were instructed to file complaints against targeted homeowners. Your video just provided additional evidence for a pattern we'd already documented. What does this mean for the charges against me? Probably nothing in the short term, but it means Karen Whitman is about to have much bigger problems than your concrete work. The story aired Saturday night during prime time. Janet Morrison had done her homework, tracing the paper trail of shell companies, interviewing displaced families, and presenting 5 years of systematic neighborhood destruction with the clinical precision of a surgical strike. The centerpiece was an interview with Randy Hutchins. Faced with evidence of his involvement in fraudulent permit applications and selective code enforcement, Karen's cousin had made a deal with prosecutors. He admitted to helping Karen target specific properties, falsifying inspection reports, and expediting complaints against families she wanted to drive away. She had a list, Randy said, looking like a man who'd aged 10 years in 1 week. Specific houses she wanted to acquire. My job was to make life difficult enough that people would sell. The reporter asked the obvious question. How many families lost their homes because of this scheme? At least 20, maybe more. Marcus watched the broadcast from his couch, feeling a mixture of vindication and sadness. 20 families. 20 sets of children who'd been forced to change schools, leave friends, start over somewhere else because one woman wanted to control a neighborhood. His phone started ringing before the story ended. Neighbors he hadn't spoken to in years. Former residents who'd been driven away, reporters asking for follow-up interviews. The story was spreading beyond local news, picking up traction on social media and cable networks. Karen Whitman had become the face of suburban gentrification abuse. Sunday morning brought a parade of official vehicles to Maple Street, FBI agents in unmarked cars, county investigators with boxes of documents, forensic accountants with laptops and calculators. Karen's house was searched for 6 hours while neighbors gathered on their porches to watch the downfall of their neighborhood tyrant. Marcus was photographing the scene when Richard Whitman approached him across the street. Mr. Reed, up close, Richard looked older than his newspaper photos, with the hollow-eyed exhaustion of a man watching his empire crumble in real time. I want to apologize for my wife's actions, and I want to make this right. Marcus studied the man's face, looking for deception or calculation. All he saw was defeat. What did you have in mind? I'm liquidating all the properties Karen acquired through her ... methods. The families who were driven away will have first option to buy back their homes at the original sale price. No profit, no interest. What about my father's sidewalk? Richard nodded as if he'd been expecting the question. I'll hire a crew to rebuild it exactly as it was. Same dimensions, same materials, and I'll pay for a proper memorial marker if you'd like. Can you bring back the silver dollar my father pressed into the concrete? Richard's shoulders sagged. No, I can't bring that back. They stood in silence for a moment, watching FBI agents carry boxes of evidence from